There's a $3 tax credit, which people confuse as a subsidy, being offered in the United States for green hydrogen. Let's just break that down. It's a tax credit which doesn't exist, on a profit which doesn't exist, in an industry which doesn't yet exist, which North America, like Australia, badly needs to come into existence. So it's a really clever economic multiplier. It's a really clever investment engine. It's been responsible for huge inflows, the biggest in decades, into the North American economy. Adopting it here, I think, makes common sense because it's not coming out of the punter's pocket, because it's being paid as a future credit on a future profit on a future industry which doesn't even exist yet.
And so does that mean that the government's Hydrogen Head Start program, in your view, is simply insufficient?
Look, I think the Hydrogen Head Start program is great, exactly as it says. It's a great start. I would say two truths can exist in the one place here. It's a really good policy, but let's rock and roll and really get green hydrogen going.
You say renewables investment fell 35% in Australia last year. Is a carbon solutions levy and a climate trigger for new energy projects enough to turn that around, and quickly?
I think it will drive major change. Apart from raising $100 billion to go into the Australian economy, to go into mums and dads and farmers, which are being impacted by very high energy costs caused by unreliable fossil fuel, I think it's a very, very good start. So yes, I'm totally in favour of a climate trigger coming into projects. Those countries who have been forward-leaning on the climate are those countries who have had the strongest economies. I want Australia to be one of those, one of the strongest economies in the world. Great for every Australian.
How concerned are you by today's news poll in The Australian showing 55% of all Australian voters support the idea of small modular nuclear reactors as a replacement technology for coal-fired power?
Oh, look, it's exactly how I would vote too if I wasn't told anything about it. If I was just asked, what do you think of small nuclear reactors? And you weren't told, oh, by the way, they're totally experimental, they don't exist. You weren't told your cost of power will go up by 400%. Plus, if you're not told any of that, then you'll say, yeah, good idea. So I'd say to all politicians who are peddling nuclear, just say, hey, it'll be with us in 10 to 20 years' time, which means you're going to be stuck with fossil fuel for the next decade or two. And by the way, you'll be paying 4 times or 5 times more for your energy than the bloke next door who's on renewable energy. Is it now really a good idea? I mean, I think if we ask the question with the facts, we'll get a totally different answer.
Why do you believe the opposition is leaning towards a policy including nuclear energy, and do you see it changing votes?
Look, I think they're leaning that way because we're a bit short of answers here. Apparently, the Labor Party owns the renewable energy space. I'd say to all my friends in the Liberal National Party, no one owns this space. It's the right space. So let's both get after renewable energy. Let's lean forward as much as you can on renewable energy, but to bring up an old dog trying to teach it a new trick like nuclear, when that technology's been out forever, when we know how much it's going to cost over renewables, 4 to 5 times, and also know that those countries who have adopted, because they have no choice, they don't have the sun, they don't have the wind, like France, they're putting up with the fact that their nuclear energy is going up every single year it was ever brought in, and of course green energy has gone down in cost every single year ever been brought in, but they do it because they have to, not because they want to. So let's be clear, we have the choice of renewable energy, they don't. Let's go for renewable energy.
The current renewables transition plan requires a bigger buy-in from farmers and rural communities. Can you understand why there has been some reluctance up until this point?
Look, I'm a bloke from the bush. I grew up in the scrub. I really know how the community works, and I'd say absolutely we need to recognise it's not just the cockies who are getting the best crop, most reliable drought-resistant crop they'll ever have, which is having a wind farm on their properties. It also impacts other farmers through transmission lines, and infrastructure for the national good has priority. So I would say yes, we need to compensate not just the cockies who generate the electricity, but also the cockies who are impacted by transmission lines. Don't use that as to create a point of division in our community. That's just politics. That's putting Australia back. That's going to cost the Australian taxpayer and every Australian mum and dad a lot more through these squabbles and not just getting on with it. Let's sit down in a room, sort out these problems. They can be fixed and not turn them into community divisions when we know we can fix them.
You're very keen that decisions are made in the interests of the next generation. To what extent should the rights of today's farmers be overridden if they're unsupportive of a rollout of transmission infrastructure on their land?
I don't think the rights of farmers should ever be overridden, let's be clear, and they are not in opposition to the rights of our future generation. They are aligned. If farmers are told that a nuclear solution is an economic and feasible solution without any facts, any figures, they're entitled to believe it. But I'd say not to the cockies, but to the politicians. Tell the full truth. The worst lie in the world is the half-truth. Tell the full truth. Yes, nuclear is possible in 10 to 20 years. Yes, it's going to cost you 4 to 5 times more. Is it still a good idea? The cockies will say, oh, that's crap. We didn't know that. Thanks for that information, mate.
But in terms of the renewable rollout, the rollout of transmission infrastructure that is proving controversial in some bush areas, should the rights of today's farmers be overridden if they're unsupportive? Should their land be resumed, for instance? How far should that go?
Look, you're talking to a cocky who's had land expropriated from our station, which has been in the family name for many generations. Land was just taken off us. We were given the market value of the land. That wasn't much for compensation. And so I do think that cockies who have transmission lines across their country deserve a right to be able to discuss that and have a reasonable compensation.
On nickel, Australia's nickel sector is in the doldrums right now. Was it a bad idea for Wyloo Metals to purchase Mincor's 3 nickel mines last year?
Look, I think we're all very wise in hindsight, and all I can say is I'm glad we did that. We will be producing and have been producing what's known as clean nickel, while companies like Tesla and others turn a blind eye to the fact that the nickel they're buying is very dirty nickel. It's been created through new coal-fired power stations. It's destroying entire rainforests. It is destroying entire marine environments because toxic waste is getting dumped into the ocean, sea, and no worries. Actually, that worries Australians. That worries the global consumer as well. So we need to make a distinction. What is dirty strategic metals like nickel and what is clean like Australia? While we don't differentiate between those two, Volkswagen, Audi, Tesla, who are just drawing nickel from very dirty sources need to come clean and say to their punters, hey, you're not actually helping the environment buying a Tesla at all. We destroyed rainforests, we destroyed marine environments to get this super cheap nickel in. Did you know that? And they'll say, no, that makes a difference.
But a decision has been made to place those mines into care and maintenance. When are you likely to be developing that clean nickel?
That really depends, say, in Canada on the government, and as soon as they become economic in Australia, we'll go straight into it. Then what we're pushing for is an understanding across the world, which is happening, that there's a big difference between dirty commodities and clean commodities. And if the consumer or the politician wants to make the same mistake, say Angela Merkel of Germany several years ago, when she hooked her entire economic future and star onto the Russian gas supply base and got completely carted out, cost the German economy trillions of dollars when Putin turned against them, when Putin used fossil fuel as a weapon, then you'd know, well, we have to open up our supply chains. Now, if you don't want your supply chains just to go back to dirty sources, cheap sources of nickel, where human rights, environment and green energy aren't taken into account, then don't complain about it in the future. If you want supply chains which are diversified and come from all over the world, then you're back in human rights, you're back in the environment, and you're back in green energy. And then we can all compete on a fair and equal basis. And
so if you believe that this is a structural problem facing Australia's domestic nickel sector, do you support an industry call for support to help the industry get through this time? And is that something that, that Wyloo Metals would take advantage on, if available?
Look, whatever Wyloo does, it's up to Wyloo. What I can say is I'm putting out an industry call, a global call, that we've got to allow consumers a choice. Dirty nickel will be all that there will be if we don't respect human rights, if we don't respect the environment, and if we don't respect pollution-free energy. So that's where we're all going to go if that's what we want. I'm saying that's actually not what we want. We learnt that lesson hard with Putin, who used it against Germany. Let's not get sucked into it again. Let's have diversified supply chains.
Dr. Forrest, considering the passion with which you have delivered your remarks today, do you believe Australia has lost its way in the energy transition?
Look, I think if you look at Australia from outside, all the squabbling, all the infighting, all the misinformation, all the creating of divisions is putting Australia back, while other countries are moving forward at speed. By all this squabbling and bickering, we're actually getting smoked. There is no choice here. Green energy is the lowest cost of energy into every Australian household. It's going to happen anyway. Green energy will not destroy the environment. Fossil fuel will continue to be unreliable, expensive, be used as a weapon, and cost more to every Australian household. So we know it's going to happen. Can we just stop all the bickering and politicking and get on with it?
Andrew Forrest, thank you for your time.
And thank you, Kirsten. I've really enjoyed being on.